Last season for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, it can be best described as a roller coaster season. They began the year 0-2 with losses to Ohio State and Marshall. Then they went on a 3-game winning streak, and it looked like the Marcus Freeman era in South Bend was picking up momentum. And then they lose a 16-14 slugfest against Stanford. Then they went on a 5-game winning streak, and they ultimately lose to USC in their final game of the regular season, ending their regular season 8-4. Their season, however, ended on a positive note with the win in the Gator Bowl against South Carolina, a team that really hit their stride in the second half of the year, along with Notre Dame. Now, 2023 for Notre Dame, I think it's reasonable to say that there are some high hopes and expectations for the Fighting Irish. They return 14 starters. That includes Audric Estime at running back, who was just short of 1,000 yards last season, 920 yards to be exact. They also return Joe Alt, who potentially will be the number one offensive tackle taken in April's NFL draft. And they return their top 4 tacklers from last season, J.D. Bertrand, Jack Kaiser, Marist Luafo, and D.J. Brown. I also want to address what they did in the transfer portal. In my opinion, I think they got the biggest transfer portal move of the offseason. They picked up Sam Hartman, the Wake Forest transfer, who was 11th in passing yards in 2022. And when I look at the box scores for Notre Dame last year, Ohio State, they lose 21-10. That was a game that they were in from start to finish. Ohio State did not have that game sealed until the very end. A 26-21 defeat against Marshall in week 2. A 16-14 loss to Stanford, as I have established that was a slugfest of a game. A 38-27 loss against USC. So when I look at those 4 losses, if they had a quarterback like Sam Hartman, I think they could have at the very least gone 11-1. Because if they would have had someone like Sam Hartman, they would have definitely beaten Marshall and Stanford. And you could honestly argue that they could have beaten either Ohio State or USC with a quarterback like Sam Hartman. But I want to get into Notre Dame's schedule here. Notre Dame is one of the teams that will begin their season in week 0 on August 26th. They will take on Navy in Dublin. The next week, they host Tennessee State. Then they go on the road at NC State, their first road game of the year. The week after that, they host Central Michigan. And on the 23rd of September, a rematch of the opener last season against Ohio State. This time it is in South Bend. They conclude the month of September on the road on November 30th at Duke. They begin October 7th at Louisville. Then another big matchup for the Irish. October 14th at home against USC. Then after a bye week, October 28th, they host Pittsburgh. And they begin the month of November on the road on November the 4th at Clemson. Then another bye week, November 18th, Senior Day. They host Wake Forest, Sam Hartman's former team. And they conclude the regular season on November the 25th at Stanford. Now looking at this schedule, I think it's acceptable to say that Notre Dame could be a sleeper team this season. Sam Hartman is the best quarterback that Notre Dame has had in a very long time. And they have 2 of their 3 toughest games at home against Ohio State and USC. They do go on the road at Clemson this season, but they dismantled Clemson last season. And I think the ceiling for Notre Dame is 11-1 or 12-0. And I don't think this is a stretch at all. I just think that if Sam Hartman, if he plays the way that he's played at Wake Forest, I think the sky is the limit for the Irish in year 2 of the Marcus Freeman era. Because Navy, that should be an easy win. Navy, it's being rumored they're going to use 2 different quarterbacks in that game. Tennessee State, that's a win. NC State, a win. Central Michigan, a win. Ohio State, I think it depends on how Ohio State looks going into this matchup. But it's going to be a hostile environment. The crowd's going to be fired up. I will say, though, at Duke on November the 30th, I think that could potentially be a trap game for Notre Dame. Because a lot of the times we do see teams like Notre Dame, they do have one of those trap games every single year. And I think at Duke, I think that is a potential candidate for a trap game, as this will be the week after the Ohio State game, and it will only be their quote-unquote second road game of the season, as the Navy game is a neutral site, but they're still traveling for that. So quote-unquote second road game of the year. Plus, I think Duke is going to be a sleeper team in the ACC. And the floor for Notre Dame, worst case scenario for them, is 8-4. And I'll be very shocked if Notre Dame does not win at least 9 games this year. And the floor of 8-4, it comes from losing those 3 tough games. Ohio State, USC, and at Clemson. And they lose one of the trap games like Duke. I mean, another candidate, it could be Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, I believe they have a history of giving Notre Dame very tough battles. But I don't think tough battles as of recently, but I'm not 100% sure at the moment. But ceiling for Notre Dame, 11-1, 12-0. Sam Hartman would be a lock for a Heisman finalist if they do indeed match this ceiling of 11-1, 12-0. Maybe even 10-2, depending on what his numbers look like, could be a Heisman finalist. But worst case scenario, 8-4. However, to make the college football playoff, many suspect that Notre Dame needs to be 12-0, but I think they can afford to be 11-1 and get in the playoff as long as one of their losses is against Ohio State or USC. At Clemson, I really don't know because we don't really know how Clemson's going to look. Clemson, they have been pretty disappointing the last couple of seasons, at least to Clemson standards. But comment your thoughts down below on Notre Dame season. Share this with every Notre Dame fan that you know. Until next time, you have a wonderful day.